Matthew 24. Oh, it was the greatest marker. I'm so glad we leave this out so that our kids can access them. And 24, and I think it starts in, let's see. We are starting in 36 and going through 51. So.
It's a long chapter.
Yeah.
It's not. It's very, very short. All right. We're on? We're good? Yep. We're ready to rock and roll. So today, I'm actually going to just drop everything all over the place because that's what cool people do. So what's interesting about this particular chapter, not just this chapter, but this particular section. Today's section is a continuation of what is being said all at once, but it technically began yesterday. Jesus is in the process of answering a question that the disciples answered. Now, I think that for me, I don't know if you get interested in like bunny trails. This particular section is riddled with lots of opportunities for bunny trails, and I think that there are times when both in today's section and yesterday's section where there's lots of opportunity to maybe miss, I think, what Jesus is really trying to say. And you know, like when sometimes Dan's like, sometimes you're too busy looking at one little leaf instead of the big forest. That is particularly true here. Now, does that mean that each leaf isn't there on purpose or that each leaf isn't important? No. But I will tell you that if you miss the picture that is big, if you miss the forest, you'll never understand the leaf. And that's the biggest problem, is that most people spend all their time zoomed in. They never pan out and get the big picture. And because of that, they're misinterpreting everything the leaf has to say. If that makes any sense at all, I think that is the biggest problem with most scripture, that people, if you don't read entire contexts often, you can very easily misunderstand and really misuse lots of different passages. And I think that have you ever had somebody inappropriately give you a verse? Like you're going through something and they think they're going to be an encouraging person, and really probably their intentions are good, but what their understanding of this particular verse is incorrect. And so when they hand it to you, instead of it being encouragement, it's actually you just want to slap them.
Yes.
Have you ever had that, Teresa? Never. Never has it ever happened to you. And so I think that the biggest reason why stuff like that happens is because we get caught up in looking at the leaves and the details. And understand, those leaves are beautiful. They're designed on purpose, but they're a part of a really big picture. And so if they don't line up with the big picture, it's off. You're not looking at the right leaf. Or your perception of it is very wrong. It's kind of like when I try to read something without my glasses on, all I can see is black ink. Like I can't make out any words. So I'm going to start off today with telling you a story. Now, the only reason I'm doing this is because instead of going through like a giant chapter, I have like a small section that is mostly stories anyway. So my adding a story to it only will further help you, hopefully, to understand. So when I was, sorry, I put that right in front. When I was a kid growing up, one of the things that we did, my dad was, people today might label him a workaholic, but really he was a man at a time when you had to pay bills. And, it was still at the time incredibly frowned upon that if you were a man and if you were on welfare or anything like that, if you had to go to someone else for help, it's not you were looking, you weren't a real man, you weren't doing a real job. And the thing is that not only that, like my dad is very entrepreneurial. So like he's good at starting things. He's good at running things. And so my dad, when I was really little, worked at a place called Rice Ford Lincoln Mercury in Warsaw. He sold cars in the morning. And then when he was done, he would go and we had a lawn care or a bush hogging business would probably be more accurate. We mowed lawns. We didn't like plant bushes or anything like that, but we would trim them if we needed to. Mostly we mowed grass, and kept your yard maintained and fields. But it wasn't uncommon. I was just texting my brother about this last night because I was like, did Dad ever just take you somewhere and leave you as a kid? Like he just drops the mower off and you at like 10, 11, 12 years old and would tell you, have it done when I come back. That was the kind of dad I had. We would mow these large properties that would take 4 or 5 hours to mow. And oftentimes, I didn't know for sure, but my best guess, knowing him now, would be that he probably had the tractor sitting somewhere already, and that he would come, he would drop us off at a place where all you have to do is mow it. He makes sure you have enough gas, you've got everything you need to do your job, and he'll leave you fully expecting to have that done when he returns. And my brother and I both were like, you didn't want to be alive at all if he came back and it wasn't finished, unless like the mower exploded and you had like literally no ability to mow. Like you better have the job done because you will regret every moment you didn't work. You will absolutely regret it. And my brother and I were both talking about this because my dad, like, he had a lot of contracts, he had a lot of work, and his philosophy was, we want to hurry up, get it all done, so that we can go home and we can relax. They had the same mentality when we were like a little older, when we were in school, in high school, middle school. If we got home from school, and my mom at that point was working, and if we got home from school, and we would turn on the TV, we better know, we knew very, very well that we were risking our lives. Because if the house was not clean, the TV should not be on for any reason. You better not be goofing off. If your homework's not done, if your chores aren't done, if the house isn't picked up, you better not be goofing off. You better not be watching TV. But there were lots of times where we would risk it, because like, hey, like this one show that you really want to watch is on. And so my brother and I would, not just my brother and I, but like we would run into the house, turn it on, and see how much we could watch before we knew mom and dad would get home, because we knew about what time they would get off work. And so we would try to do both, and then always get in trouble because we had been watching TV anyway, and the house still wasn't clean when they would get home. So with that being said, here is the clip that I would like to show you. Oh boy. Probably not going to believe this, but I actually had it pulled up further.
Yes.
Okay, here we go.
So great.
Here we go.
One last run. Can't believe the child has finally.
I don't think this is right. Hold on. Sorry. Wrong.
Handsome as a lion, that one.
This is close enough.
Watch that backside all day.
Okay, this is where I wanted to start it. Sorry, right here.
All right, team, let's get ready for the pre-race cheer. Ready? Yes, sir. Ready? Yes, sir. All right. 1, 2, 3.
Who's the captain of our crew? Who's a friend to me and you? Kinda nice, good looking too. Santa, Santa, yes, Santa!
Get back to work.
Who's the big hot bag of air? Who doesn't have to comb his hair? Who doesn't bathe and doesn't care? Psycho! Psycho!
Yay, Tiger! Hey! What's happening, Star? Where you been, man?
You almost missed my all-time
World record. 7th derby in a row.
easy Rasta. Not going to get my best friend on his day of days.
Maurice, my grandfather says you're definitely going to make it to the Olympics. He says you're even faster than your father. Yeah, man, drink than Jamaica.
Hey, you know what my grandfather said?
What?
Get back to work.
Come man, see the finish line, right?
Hi, Jerry. Jerry's set already?
Ready. That boy's never ready. He's a lazy, crazy, sorry, no good bugger.
So what you laughing at?
Position.
No, man.
Anything good?
Get to up yet.
I'll explain.
Let's go.
On your mark.
Feel the rhythm. Feel the rhyme. Get on up. It's push that time.
And go.
I love Jamaica, and Jamaica loves me.
Psycho. You dead?
Yeah, man.
So that's kind of where this here. I was trying to cue it up last night, and my kids came into the room, and they all knew that sign. Like, you want to know what my mom always said? Get back to work. Because when we were kids, when we saw this, like this was one of the most quoted movies because it was so easy. Because my parents actually said that. Get back to work. What are you doing? Get back to work. My dad wouldn't let us like do anything without like steering you back in. Are you moving that toy? What were you supposed to be doing? Don't even look at that toy. Get over there. And he would just be on top of you the whole time, reinforcing what you were supposed to be doing. Let's jump in and start reading here. And I'm going to actually go back a tiny bit just to kind of give context. In verse 3 of 24, he says this: while he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples approached him privately and said, when will these things happen? And what is the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Now, this is what's interesting. Here, what we're getting ready to do is the second part of the question, which is what is the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? So what the disciples are asking is, what's the sign? In other words, what do we look for? Yep. The sign of the second coming and the end.
Verse 3.
But this is the first part was for a totally different question. These two are lumped together. So the sign of the second coming and the end of the age, even the disciples understood them to happen simultaneously. So they weren't going, the second coming is a separate occurrence. And so here we jump in. If we jump on down then to verse 36, he says this, "Now concerning that day and hour, no one knows, neither the angels of heaven nor the Son." Now I want to, except the Father alone. There is a little thing there that does say that this is very interesting, because this presents a giant theological debate. This is what I was talking about with the leaves thing. That some of the early manuscripts omit "nor the Son." So as far as the giant debate that a lot of people get stuck up on, especially people who want to do verse by verse like what we do, is this idea where it says that the Son doesn't know. And I just want to point it out only so that you know it's there, so that you can kind of look into it on your own. One of the things Dan and I have talked about several different times is there's lots of different occasions throughout the scriptures where the earliest ones will not have something, and then later ones will have something. Now, does that mean that what the later one was using when they were writing down, when they were transcribing, does that mean that it wasn't originally there? Not necessarily. They could very well, in another 10 years, find some crazy old, piece of whatever they call it, scroll, and they'll find this is even older than the other ones, and for some reason the ones in between were just missing stuff. Who knows? That kind of stuff does happen. In fact, the Dead Sea Scrolls was a big part of solving lots of issues that actually had that. And so all I want to point out is this, that if it actually says what mine says, in other words, if it does say neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, a lot of people use the Philippians passage that talks about how Jesus lays down, basically kind of gives up his all-knowingness, so to speak, while he's incarnate. So while he's just a person on the earth, he would be laying down his ability to know absolutely everything for the sake of being a person, so that he, like us, has to live in a constant state of dependence on God. There is that very dominant philosophy. There is also the philosophy that just says this is just a it just got it added in by a scribe somewhere, and that it's inaccurate. Jesus is fully God and fully man and knows absolutely everything at all times. And the interpretation of the Philippians passage, that doesn't mean necessarily what we think it means. So those are the two lines of thinking. I don't care which one you choose to go down. Personally, I'm totally okay with it saying what it says and using Philippians to back it up. So there's that. Let's keep going. For in those days, as verse 37, as the days of Noah were, so the coming of the Son of Man will be. For in those days, before the flood, they were eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage until the day Noah boarded the ark. They didn't know until the flood came and swept them all away. This is the way the coming of the Son of Man will be. Two men will be in a field, one will be taken and one left. 2 women will be grinding grain with a hand mill, and one will be taken and one left. Therefore, be alert, since you don't know what day your Lord is coming. But know this, if the homeowner had known what time the thief was coming, he would have stayed alert and not let his house be broken into. This is why you are also to be ready, because the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom the master has put in charge of his household, to give him food at the proper time? Blessed is that servant, whom the master finds doing his job when he comes. Truly I tell you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But if that wicked servant says in his heart, my master is delayed, and starts to beat his fellow servants and eats and drinks with drunkards, that servant's master will come on a day he doesn't expect him, and at an hour he does not know, and he will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So this, a couple things. The reason I think that Cool Runnings is such a good illustration for this particular passage is because what stands out to me and my kids the most about this passage is Sanka, who all throughout the whole movie is in a constant state of telling people, get back to work. Get back to work. Like everything that they do, it doesn't matter. Like I do that with my kids, like just for fun because of the movie. We'll just be cleaning, and I have obviously 6 kids, and so we'll be down in the basement. It's time to clean the basement. You'll have 2 kids who will work really hard. You'll have 3 kids who won't work hard at all, and you'll have 2 kids that are kind of like mostly just sitting there. Now, granted, one of them's a baby, so it's not his fault. But like even Elijah, if you sit there with him and help him, he will work. But Gideon and Josiah and Mercy sometimes just get so distracted. They want to play. So they're supposed to be picking up their toys, but what they do instead sometimes is they want to play with their toys. And that's natural. We would all do that, right? Which is why our parents would say, get back to work. And so when it's the same for us. And the thing, though, is the consequences of not doing the job drive the enforcement during the work. Does that make sense? So, like, when people are coming over, the way that we encourage our kids to make sure that the house is clean, please pick up, please do this. Like, there's more urgency there because we know that people are coming. And if we don't clean, it's not just for our looking pleasure. This is for everybody. Like, people are coming over. We want to look as respectable as possible, which, there it is. But here's the thing. Like, if you'd have been here this morning at 8 o'clock and there's giant amounts of food and their tables are sticky and, like all this craziness that had been going on, like it doesn't provide a good experience for you guys. And so for us, even like as pastors, do people want to go to a church if they came every single time and nothing's ever ready for people? No, nobody would ever want to go to a church like that. And so it's the same thing. Like with this, that Jesus is telling them that in a manner of speaking, one, he's telling them he's leaving. They know he's leaving. He's given them enough evidence throughout time that he's going to leave. He's also warned them already that he's going to die on the cross and rise again. They missed that one a little bit. But they know he's going to be leaving. They also know, based on messianic prophecy, that what is going on currently requires him to leave at some point in time and to return. However, what is really interesting is that Jesus is reinforcing this philosophy that you better be ready when I get back. And as we get into tomorrow's chapter, Matthew 25 has even more instances where he is driving home this point. Be ready, get to work. If I come and the yards are not mowed, You could say there will be hell to pay, and in Jesus' instance, that's literally what he's saying. The last verse, when he's saying there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, he's referring to an actual place called Gehenna, which is in a valley right outside Jerusalem, which is where they threw all of their trash. They would burn feces there. It was literally, basically, it was their local dump, but it was also called hell. Jesus uses that analogy to paint a picture for everyone that is Jewish there, especially, to recognize that hell is a real place. And not only that, if you end up in hell, you will eventually end up in the lake of fire. Right. So here we go. Today, this is incredibly simple, but the first illustration that he uses, or the first thing that he refers back to, is Noah. And he says that they were doing a couple of things. They were eating, drinking, and marrying. Now, is there anything wrong with these things? No. No, not in and of themselves. But what was getting ready to happen?
Worldwide flood.
A worldwide flood. God is getting ready to destroy the earth. What is Noah doing while everybody else is doing this?
Getting ready.
He's getting ready by doing what?
Getting the ark prepared for the people, actually.
Getting ready. What is he doing? Like you said, he's getting an ark prepared, but like, what is he actually like? If you were a 4-year-old kid, like, how would you say this? Go ahead.
Well, with the Genesis account, I mean, the narrative carries on this refrain that says, "And Noah did everything the Lord commanded him to do."
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I'll tell you, it still stuns me when I think about this. How throughout the whole Noah narrative, Noah says nothing. He just does. Like, the only thing that he says is at the very end with his prayer. That's the only time you hear him speak.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he is totally silent. God speaks and he does. God speaks, he does. Again and again and again. And it's remarkable. It's absolutely remarkable.
Now, does anybody remember what I was going for is he's building something.
Yeah.
Really are.
Which is also called what?
Working.
He's working!
Oh, yeah.
Hey!
Yeah.
Hey! Get back to work! He's working.
Yeah.
God said, hey, I'm going to flood the earth, and the only way you're going to survive is when we build a boat. There's a giant argument at the time that at the time it had never rained before. There's a philosophy that would say that probably the earth up until this point was more like being in a greenhouse where the water just kind of is always around and it's just super duper crazy humid like Florida, and everything is green always because there's water everywhere. It doesn't have to rain because God is watering everything through that way. Now I'm not super sciencey. I'm not sure what the term for that would be, but God shows up to Noah and tells him, hey, I'm going to destroy the earth. It's so wicked. I've got to do this. And he tells him, but for like 80 years. Actually, I think it's more than that.
120, isn't it?
A certain amount of years.
Right.
A large amount of years, in and day out, is working.
Just working, yeah.
He doesn't know when it's going to rain. All he knows is God says, build a boat. Here's the specs. Build it to this specification. He doesn't know when it's going to start raining. He just knows it's going to rain. I have to be ready. The only way you're going to be ready is if the boat's done. What good would it have done him if the entire boat was built, but he never actually put in the patchy stuff that seals the boat? Well, I just wanted to take a break. Yeah, but it's raining. Right? Like, what if he'd have built the boat but didn't stock up the food that he's told to stock up? Well, great. Like, now you're just going to starve on a boat. A lot of good that we're just going to have to start eating each other. Here's the thing. Like, Noah is in a particular situation that is incredibly, I think, informative for what Jesus is trying to say. You don't know the day or the hour it's going to rain. You just know that it's going to rain. You don't know the day or the hour that Jesus is coming back. You just know he's coming back. And that if you're not working, you're not going to be ready when he comes. And each illustration that he uses is talking about 2 people will be grinding grain, right? One will be taken, the other will be left. The other one is 2 people will be in the field. One will be taken, the other is left. In both instances, he's emphasizing this. These are people who are working.
Well, with the working, was he not sharing the word of God? No.
According to Peter, he was.
Okay.
Yeah. One of the things that Peter emphasizes is that Noah was warning people that it's going to rain. You know, and is that him just still working on the boat? What are you doing? I'm building a boat. Why? Because it's going to rain. Sure it is. So with that, you know, I think that's really important. You know, he's building a boat. But there's also the warning, verbal warning. So let's keep going. And then he goes on and he gives this, well, he says this at the end of Noah, this is the way the coming of the Son of Man will be. He's trying to emphasize that in particular with Noah, that this is the way. In other words, you could say this. France actually says that there isn't a sign that he gives them. I would beg that the sign that he gives them is Noah. I think that the sign already happened in history, and that Jesus is saying that the sign that you need to look for already happened. Be ready. Get to work. I've told you what to do. I've told you, explained everything you need, every instruction that you need to carry out the work, to build this ark that will save the people, which is all through Jesus, right? Everything you need. Jesus basically built Noah's ark in this particular case by dying on the cross, providing for eternal life. All you have to do is tell people about it. There is work to be done. The good works, helping people, taking care of people, following the commands of Jesus, all of that stuff, all we have to do is obey like Noah did. That is the work that we're supposed to be doing. But, like Noah, right, what is a lot of the church caught up in? Eating, drinking, and marrying, which is also called
Deception.
life. Well, I mean, in some ways it's deception, but we've all, like, lots of us are married. You know, Stephen back here is trying to get married. You know, picked up a girl. Now, is this saying, like, that you should have, like, that nobody at the time of Noah should have gotten married? No, nor is it saying that Noah wasn't married. Like, he was married, he's got kids, he's making his kids work. You know, he's probably eating and drinking while he's building the ark. But he's not caught up in it, which is the emphasis Jesus is trying to make. That these are people who are distracted. These are not people who are, one of the things that I put down, that they're oblivious. They're in this, like, this state to where if what Peter is telling us is true, that, like, Noah's saying, hey, this is going to happen, you need to get ready, and they're like, no, it's not. Or even if they just are like, well, maybe, let me go think it over, and then just never do anything about it. it doesn't mean that they're against the message that he's saying. It just means that they don't ever do something, which is almost worse, because then you know and then you do nothing. You knew better oftentimes has higher consequences than knowing nothing and not being ready. So here's the thing. What I think about this, one of the things is that he's emphasizing, actually right here in verse, let's see. In verse 42, therefore be alert, since you don't know what day or hour your Lord is coming. One of the ways as kids when we were supposed to be mowing, like we knew that if we quit working so that we could just relax, that if my dad were to get back, we knew that there would be hell to pay in a manner of speaking. We knew that if we were to just take a nap, to go, like there was this one place that we used to mow that had, it was right next to a playground. Next to a Boys and Girls Club, so there was always kids out. Like we could have very easily, we're the same age as most of the people that are there. We could have easily got off the mower, gone over there, and got distracted, started playing. And then when my dad would have gotten home, we'd have regretted every moment we played. In the same way, that is what will happen for those who are in. Keep in mind, Jesus is specifically speaking to disciples. He is speaking to, according to the Luke or Mark, one of them is talking, he's talking to the four, like the Peter, James, John, and Andrew. But then in this one, either way, his audience is the disciples. He's specifically talking to people who are disciples. In this last illustration that he gives, he says, who then is a faithful and wise servant? Even the wicked servant is still a servant. Like, I want you to keep this in mind, that a lot of the church gets caught up in this reality that as long as I'm saved, I'm okay. Like you prayed a prayer, and therefore you don't have to do anything else. A lot of this comes out of the philosophy that says once saved, always saved. Now, I don't mind necessarily if you want to believe that, as long as everything else follows up. The reality is you can be a wicked, lazy servant, but still be a servant. According to Jesus, he says that he's going to get cut to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. Like, the consequences for being a servant that is wicked is the exact same for those who aren't a servant at all. You're no different than those who are unsaved. The problem is, you knew better. Now, let's jump into this, because I think this is interesting. He said in verse 46, blessed is that servant whom the master finds doing his job when he comes. Have you ever worked somewhere where when the moment the supervisor is out of the room, people start doing a really bad job? Like they do enough to not get caught. Like they look busy, or it's like, okay, so on Wednesday, because of the storm, we had to cancel church and all this stuff. So I had seen this ad. I grew up, because we had the lawn care in the winters, my parents would send us out to go clean people's driveways. In fact, your mom has sent me out to clean people's driveways. When we were living in Illinois, she was like, hey, go clean this lady's driveway. Okay. And like for me, there's a storm. It's time to get to work. Like that's how my brain just operates. Like I don't have you're in trouble. It's my time. It's not like I should have become a fireman maybe. Fire! Yeah. with this, like, so I ended up seeing this ad for a local snow plowing crew needed somebody to run a snowblower. Well, most people don't want to run a snowblower because you're in the elements. You're in the worst of it. And not only that, like if you don't know what you're doing and it's windy, it can actually be incredibly awful. When we started the one night, it was like, I think it was, they said it was only like 11 degrees, but it felt like negative 11 because of the wind. And it's true. And so like I have all my gear. I've had it my whole life. And so I go out there. We do our job. It's just two of us. And then we go to this other property because there's drama at this property where these guys who are working, they're getting paid to be there, but they are doing either they're not working hard enough or fast enough or something, so they needed extra people to come help. And so I'm on this snowblower crew at this. There's two guys in trucks. They doing what they call backtracking, which is when they pull up as close to the house as they can, put the plow down, and then they pull it backward. And then what you're supposed to do with the blower is basically get even closer to the house, get all that, either shoot it towards where they're going to backtrack it or shoot it off the drive so that they can get their car out. Because what good does it do to clear the whole driveway but still have this giant pile of snow right in front of the drive or the door so you can't go anywhere? And so that was my job. And on top of that, you clean off the sidewalks so they can get in and out of their house, depending on where they park, and so one of the things, I'm working with this guy. He's huge. Like, he's big enough that he can pick up the whole blower on and off the truck himself. Now, I can pick up a blower and put it in the back of my van. I can't get it above my chest, like, because I got to hold it like this, and this guy's like, yeah, he's huge. But here's the thing, like, the moment the supervisor disappears, like, so the way it works is you do a house. And each house is a condo. So there's two houses, right? So there's a sidewalk on both sides. So I do mine. Usually the way it was working was I just do that whole building, both sides. And then he would walk ahead and do the next building. Well, I was going on to my next building, and then I noticed, like, he's just walking down the sidewalk, just taking off. Like, he totally started a building and then didn't finish it all. And then later, I'm doing this one house, and the sidewalk along the front of the property had been done, but then the sidewalks along the side of the house hadn't been touched at all. And the way you can prove it, because it drifts, right? And snow, especially the loose, the not wet snow, like really blows a lot. And so there was definitely a lot of drifting. But the way I knew it was because my blower is shooting out either ice, which is at the very bottom, always, or it's wet, which is only at the bottom. Because that's where all the initial, when it was first starting snowing, everything melts and it gets soggy at the bottom. My blower is shooting off soggy stuff, which means that for 2 days, they had been telling their boss that they had done everything, that it looked good, and that when they got to go home, because they knew it's still going to snow, they can get away with it. Now, here's the thing. Lots of people, like, I don't even know who these people are. So, like, I can't even throw them out. I don't know who they are. They don't know me. But, like, I was raised, you don't do that. And I got in the truck. I told he would have been like my supervisor. He's the guy that runs my crew is me and him. But he's in charge of me. And I told him, I was like, they never did that. And he goes, well, how do you know? It's shooting wet ice. Like, it's shooting the wet snow out. They've never done that. And I was explaining to him, I was like, to me, that bothers me for a couple reasons. Because one, I care about people. If somebody, I'm like, let's say this. Let's say I pay somebody to show up at Teresa's house to clean the snow out of her driveway so that she can get in and out. She doesn't have a garage. She can't just walk out of her house, get in the car. She's got to walk outside of the house to get to the car to get in. If somebody does a bad job, how in the world is my friend who can barely see How is she supposed? She can't see if the snow is too tall. She can't see if there's something there. What if something fell into the snow that could hurt her if she trips on it? Like, to me, that bothers me. Why? Because the communities we're doing are filled with old people. That if somebody's doing a bad job, it's not just going to affect, oh, nobody will ever see it. Yeah, but what if somebody gets hurt because you did a crappy job? Because you chose not to do your job to the fullest. It's not just about who's going to see it and who's not going to see it. It's about who's the one really silly old person who needs to get out in the middle of a storm, right, and go to Kroger. Or maybe I shouldn't have said silly. Because, so the first night we start, it's probably 6 o'clock. This lady comes out of her house in a panic. The guy who was backdragging had already backdragged her yard, and I was getting ready to start just blowing. And, she could very easily get her vehicle out. But she very panically says, can you please have him come back and do it again? Because if it blows and drifts shut, because of how much snow was already in her drive, she's like, I won't be able to get out. And I have a really, really sick grandson in here. And I don't know if I'm going to have to go to the hospital in the middle of the night. I need to be able to get out of my drive. And so she pulls her car out. We clean everything out. We make sure it's spick and span. It looks great. She's able to pull in. She's very happy. But she's still worried, so she let me pray with her. She actually started crying when I asked. But that's the kind of person I imagine for every house that I do, because I don't know what's going on inside of that house. One of the things that I was explaining to the guy that I was driving with is that, yes, I was raised to do a good job, no matter who's watching. But why? Because my dad knew that God is always watching. And that ultimately, who am I serving when I'm doing this work? That as a pastor, who am I serving? If I do a bad job, who am I serving? Yes, one, I'm serving you guys. I'm serving those who are part of the church. But on top of that, no matter what, at the end of the day, every single hour, every minute, I'm going to give an account for that. When Jesus shows up, I'm going to be a servant. And the question is he going to be like, hey, you're wicked? You lazy bum, you've done absolutely nothing with the time I gave you? Or is he going to be like, man, you did such a good job, here's more responsibility? Which is kind of a unique and interesting thing. Is lots of people want promotions, which always lead to more responsibility. But if you don't want to do a good job with the little things that you have, you're never going to get promoted. Amen. But what's crazy is people want responsibility, which leads to status, which leads to respect, which is good and important. But people don't want to do the little things, which are what lead to those things. So that, how many times have you ever had a manager who doesn't do little things well and then ends up only lasting like a week because the store goes downhill really fast? Or how many businesses have you talked to where they shut down because of poor management? It's because they're horrible at little things. Always. Even if it's counting pennies. I used to work at the Jimmy John's in Peru, the South. And I loved it because the guy cared about everything. Absolutely everything. When he asked you to clean the toilet, because you clean the toilet because somebody has to sit on it, and that person's important. Because of that, cleaning the toilet's important. Why do we stack the chips the way that we do? Because people need to be able to see these chips. They're hungry. They need to have that. And those people are important. So because of that, these chips are important. This is the way he treated everything. I'm horrible at counting money. I'm really horrible with numbers. So like counting anything for me is always hard. And we're standing there. He wants me to be able to be a closer. In order to do that, you have to count down the drawer at the end of the night. And I counted down the same drawer, probably 50 times because I did it wrong most of those times. And he would just be like, no, that's not right. Do it again. But he trusted me because he knew I wasn't doing it on purpose. I'm just really bad at math. But with that, one of the things he would tell me is every single penny matters. He goes, you don't want more money in there than what you're supposed to have, because then you ripped off a customer. You don't want less money that's what's supposed to be in there, because then you're ripping me off and yourself. We don't want to rip anyone off. We want to do a good job. We want to be as precise as possible. Why? For him, it's because we want this business to thrive so that we can better serve the community. As Christians, we have work, whether we're at a physical work, whether it's at Aldi, whether it's, wherever. We all have a job that we're supposed to be doing, whether it's with YouTube or whatever channel we're doing. Even if it's, I don't know, whatever ministry we have. One of the things that Ellie's wanting to do more of is something called mom care, is what she's nicknamed it for now, where she wants to go and just help moms, give them a break, where she would just show up at the house and clean their house if they want it, or just sit and talk with them, distract the kids, play with the kids, whatever they need just so they can breathe. Go take a shower. I'll watch your kid. Like just something like that. And for her, like, what good would it be, right? If she shows up, hey, I'll watch your kid while you take a shower, if she's just sitting there on her phone the whole time and the kid still destroys the house. Right? Like, we have to be people who recognize that when our supervisor isn't in the room, that's the time to do your best work. Because it will absolutely show when he gets back. He says this, blessed. I assume that's the same one as the good laugh, which is interesting to me because this assumes that when you work hard, when you're not distracted, when you're not caught up with the things of this life, when you're focused on what you're supposed to be focused on and you're working and nobody has to tell you to get back to work, you're blessed. And not only that, you'll be rewarded. Truly, I tell you, he will be put in charge of all his possessions. One of the end times philosophies that is talked about both in the prophets, right, and in Revelation. Is this idea that everybody's going to be rewarded at some point in time for the work they do. The apostles are promised that they will have the thrones, right? That they will have areas and territories. In fact, lots of the disciples are taught, like, there's this idea, right, that if Jesus is ruling the world from Jerusalem, he'll have these little people all over the world, that are kind of ruling things on his behalf, similar to the way we have governors and mayors and all this stuff. But if you're an unfaithful servant, you're not going to be running anything. You can guarantee that. And that's what Jesus is emphasizing here, is that what they're looking for is a sign. How are we going to know when you're coming? Why? I want to know what time you're going to get off work so that I can turn the TV off in enough time to still clean the house before you get home. And Jesus doesn't give them that. He said, everything you need to know is right here. You better be working, because if the boat isn't ready when I show up, you're dead. Maybe we should name this one, They'll be hell to pay. What I thought was also really kind of interesting that France pointed out is that the phrase here where it says cut them to pieces, some of the translations say cut in two. He said that this language is only ever used in the scriptures in reference to sacrifices. And so, like, he's kind of making this point, so to speak, that first off, that what happens to the wicked servant isn't meant to be interpreted metaphorically or figuratively. That it is absolutely meant to be interpreted as literally. Like when we read where Jesus says, cut out your eye, it would be better to not sin than to go into heaven maimed. A lot of people were like, yeah, Jesus is just using funny words to make a point. Quit sinning. That's not the case here. That we absolutely have to recognize that there is a physical punishment that will take place for those who are found to be wicked servants. So, just real quick, verse 50 ends with, on a day he doesn't expect, and an hour he doesn't know. One of the things that I think personally, this is a stance that I currently hold that I've changed because of Mr. France. This is kind of interesting because I think it's really informative. What is one of the most common things that people in the church are talking about right now because of the political climate and what's going on in the world? What are one of the things people are talking about?
CRT.
COT? Sure.
But like eroding religious freedoms and like the encroaching persecution of
Yeah.
the church.
A lot of people are talking about how I think Jesus is coming within my lifetime. I've heard people say within 10 years. Why? Well, a couple of things. One is the Bible will be fully translated and able to be carried to every nation, so that every language on the earth will have a Bible in their translation, which is one of the things we know, will have to happen before Jesus is able to come back. But here's what's interesting, is that this is the attitude that personally I feel is taking place in the church. Is that people are trying to figure out the time that their dad gets off work so they can have the house clean. And there is, in my opinion, a mass panic going on. Because you have pastors who have been preaching garbage for so long. And you have people who have done nothing for the kingdom of God. And their best bet would be to run as fast as they can now to get their oil, which is what we're going to talk about in the next couple of days. Get your oil and get back so that if he comes back, at least you'll be ready, even if it's at the last second. A person who gives their life to Christ on their deathbed is still saved. But you don't know when you're going to die. And most people aren't given the luxury of a deathbed. To me, this is why there is such fear and fear-mongering taking place. The reason we need the United States of America to so badly not lose our rights is because we want to be able to prolong this. Eating, drinking, and marrying. If I can ensure that I live in a democracy or in a republic where my rights are protecting me, where I can live as long as possible, there's an attitude that somehow says that I can push the tribulation back, I can push Jesus' coming back, and sure, he'll still come. His will still come. I'll still be saved. I'll still be a good person. But I won't have to be in torment. I won't have to be persecuted. But the reality is we're not ready for persecution because we're distracted. We're caught up in silly things. Christians are spending so much time doing all the things that everyone else is doing. If we checked our phones, would we find that what we've been watching are things that edify you, are things that help you, equip you to better serve the Lord? Or are they just mind-numbing? Now, does it mean you never watch a movie? Does it mean you don't ever watch a sports game? No. Does it mean you don't ever get married? No. It just means that you're not focused, that your heart isn't so set on being married. This is part of the reason why the divorce rate is also so high, right? Is that you've heard lots of people talk about this, is that the build-up, the anticipation is for the wedding day itself and not the marriage. They're not preparing to be married for the rest of their life, so they don't go to counseling. They don't figure out all the things that are about the other person so that when they get married and they have to live together, that they're ready. They spend all this time preparing for the event itself, and then when the event is over and the honeymoon's over, they don't know what to do with each other. It's the same thing. They're caught up in the wrong stuff. It's going to rain. Hey, guess what? If marrying someone and making babies to help you build an ark gets you into a place to where you're able to better do the work, then do it. Why? Because the work was the focus in the first place. Obeying the Lord, being prepared was the focus. But if you're just always longing for the relationship, you're always longing for food because you're a foodie and you're just like, all I want is that next great meal, which lots of us do because meals are great. But when that's the content of your heart, when that's the longing of what you're doing, then you're distracted and your focus is off, and you will be found a wicked and lazy servant. So, hooray! Let's pray. Lord, we just number one, we want to apologize on behalf of anyone in this church who could be found a wicked servant. And Lord, I pray that today's message would be like Sanka yelling at us to get back to work. And Lord, I pray for the church at large. Lord, I pray that you would forgive us, especially the church in America, who cares oftentimes so much more about our rights than what you've told us to do. Lord, forgive us for spending so much time being offended over things that unsaved people are doing. Lord, forgive the church. I was just reading last week, there's 2 different pastors in our community who are in jail right now because they were incredibly distracted. Lord, they forgot you were coming back. Jesus, we ask for you to forgive us. We ask for you to forgive the church, our church, the community. Lord, help us to get back to work. Lord, I pray that your spirit would come down and burn in such a way that we can't help but do the work. That obeying you would drive us, compel us. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, well, that